common sense South Africans need to stand up against that. And the leaders who aim to show that they stand for the best interests of common sense South Africans need to do so loudly and urgently. There really, really is no time to waste.
Property rights in South Africa are under threat. Joining me to discuss is Gabriel Crouse of the IRR. So Gabriel, we have two pieces of legislation, the Expropriation Bill and also the Land Court Bill, which are making their way through Parliament. Could you provide us with some background and what is the risk to property rights in the country?
They really pose an existential threat to our constitutional democracy by dragging a steak knife across property rights. What the Expropriation Bill does is primarily allow for expropriation without compensation. What the Land Court Bill does essentially is allow a kind of kangaroo court to preside over property rights cases where they involve land. But it's worth just going, I think, step by step through some of the details. As a refresher, the Expropriation Bill in Section 12(3)(a) says that it is just and equitable to take away someone's private property if they've bought it for the purpose of selling it for a profit. And Section 12(3)(c) says that it is, again, just and equitable to take away someone's private property if they've lost control of it. In other words, if someone has taken it away from them, then the government can take the title deed away too. In addition, Section 12(3) is an open list of circumstances for expropriation without compensation. So there are, undreamed of reasons for people's stuff to be taken away. And furthermore, the definition of expropriation has been set in such a fashion that the state can take custodianship of someone's property, say that that is not an expropriation because expropriation has been narrowly defined, and then it doesn't even have to apply the so-called just and equitable test. That's very important because even if the Constitution, as it stands, because it failed to be amended last year, even if it, as it stands, defends private owners from Section 12(3) of the Expropriation Bill, it won't be able to defend them on this technicality from the narrow definition of expropriation, and as a result from seizures via custodianship. So that's the Expropriation Bill. Then there's the Land Courts Bill, which in brief allows for the rules of evidence to be watered down, basically to the point where hearsay can be dispositive, and it allows for land activists to outvote judges in deciding matters of fact. So it calls them assessors, and it's clear that the assessors can be radical Marxist race nationalists and who have vested interests in cases. And two assessors and one judge preside over each case. And on deciding matters of fact, there's a simple vote. So the assessors can just outvote the judge. Those are just two of the aspects of the Land Court Bill that make it concerning. Of course, it also applies to evictions. It changes the jurisdictional question so that people come and grab your land, and then the question has to come before the court of, did this person reasonably expect that they deserve to have that land because of the unlawful entering on premises bill, which we've talked about before. Again, this is going to be decided by assessors who really have no pretense of being independent judges.
All right, so Gabriel, I was pleased to see that the organized agriculture lobby, Agri-SA, has come out in criticism of the Expropriation Bill specifically. So are you encouraged to see that organized business groups and agricultural groups are starting to recognize the extent of the risk posed to property rights in the country?
Yes, indeed. I think that pressure has to build, pressure has to translate into halting both the Expropriation Bill and the Land Courts Bill. We have been involved in a letter writing campaign with the members of the committee that unfortunately has just signed off on this thing. We did, through our pressure, I think, manage to buy a little bit of time. It might be that all there is to buy is time. But if you can push this back past 2024, the electorate gets an opportunity to weigh in. The Institute of Race Relations did a survey in 2020, which asked people if you prefer EWC or growth. And only 15% preferred EWC, 80% preferred growth. That's across all 8 race groups. So ordinary people clearly have their minds made up. Venezuela, Zimbabwe, those are cautionary tales, not aspirational tales. But the question is, will organized civil society and big business stand up and represent those common interests too? And that's an important question, because it's really those organized groups that have the greatest capacity to touch the pinch points of pressure that government feels, and to make them feel that pressure. It's worth bearing in mind that it only requires a simple majority to pass either of these bills. But it's also worth bearing in mind that only 204 votes went to the constitutional amendment last year. So if all the opposition parties in Parliament coalesce, and if you splinter a few ANC MPs and get them to break ranks, as they effectively did last time, just to stay away, that could be sufficient to block these bills. But that is going to require immense pressure. And yes, kudos to Agri-SA, kudos to the one big bank that has reaffirmed its position against expropriation without compensation. But in terms of our letter writing campaign, there's the rest of the big banks have continued to remain quiet, and I think financial services, all aspects of business, really are going to have to make up their minds and make it up very loudly and very clearly about the future of South Africa's economic stability.
Right. So, Gabriel, you mentioned party politics. We're steaming ahead to the 2024 elections. In this portfolio committee on public works and infrastructure, the DA was very critical of this bill. We also had the ACDP refusing to endorse it as well. So what does this mean for the wild dogs thesis that we've been putting forward on this show? Could the opposition parties use this threat against private property rights as a sort of a galvanizing force, a catalyst for cooperation? If you cast your mind back to the 2019 elections, this EWC issue was actually surprisingly quiet in terms of the big campaigning issues. Even the EFF at the last minute added, we want land and jobs now. So, they clearly saw the unemployment issue as also being cogent. So do you think this EWC issue might galvanize the opposition?
It really ought to. This is a huge opportunity for the opposition to rally around a policy. When it comes to personalities, the opposition is never really going to agree because there are a lot of personalities in the room. When it comes to promises, yes, they can all agree to promise more jobs and fabulous life for all. But what's really going to get us there? South Africans are sick and tired of hearing empty promises. What's going to get us there is defending ourselves against further attacks on liberty, on the ability to go about one's business, on the ability to hold on to one's stuff. Our polling shows, yes, unemployment's the biggest issue. That's going to be fundamentally undermined, made worse by expropriation without compensation. If you gather up, one of the next biggest issues is crime, corruption, security, lump those together, and they really get a huge amount of concern. And really what expropriation without compensation does is it adds the state itself to the list of criminals that might come and take your stuff. Ordinary people fully appreciate how dangerous it is to give corrupt government officials the capacity to reach into our pockets directly, take away our title deeds, take away our prospects of growth. So this is an opportunity for the opposition parties to get together. It's very good to see the IFP and the ACDP and the DA all really standing together on this. But I think it's also going to be important for those parties that aren't represented in Parliament, but that do have a large national voice, to make those messages clear. So I'm thinking about Action SA. I'm thinking about Musi Maimani's new party. This is genuinely an existential threat. The National Democratic Revolution that the ANC has upheld for half a century at this stage has as its end goal the state having all the power and the citizen having no power. There really is no common sense person who wants that. And I don't think it at this stage even makes sense to distinguish between the ANC and the EFF on this issue. It's a matter of timing between those two, I think, and the timing is to see who can get to the National Democratic Revolution first. Common sense South Africans need to stand up against that, and the leaders who aim to show that they stand for the best interests of common sense South Africans need to do so loudly and urgently. There really, really is no time to waste.
Gabriel Crouse, thank you very much. Let's hand over to you, our audience. What risk do you think these two pieces of legislation pose to property rights in South Africa? Leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. Also, if you enjoyed this analysis, you might want to become a client of the CRA. We have a number of reports, webinars, and weekly risk alerts that will will help you to navigate through these uncertain times in South Africa. There is a link in the description below where you can find out more. My name is David Ansara. This is the CRA. Until next time, take care.